I want to tell you a story about a man named William Beamish. His tale is profoundly heartbreaking, a quiet testament to the human spirit during an unimaginable hardship. The year was 1878, and County Cork, Ireland was suffocating under a winter unlike any the locals had ever witnessed. The air, usually thick with the scent through the peat, hung heavy with eerie silence. William Beamish, a man in his mid-40s, earned his living as a humble carpenter. His hands, permanently calloused, were a map of years of toil. He lived alone, his wife, Martha, having passed away years earlier, and his children having chased dreams across the Atlantic. The diary, a silent confidant. William's constant companion was his most cherished possession, a leather-bound volume his father had given him when he first started carpentry. Each night, under the flickering candlelight, he meticulously recorded his daily thoughts. In his entry for December 13th, a sense of doom permeates the cramped handwriting. December 13th, 1878. The sky today has turned a desolate gray. The winds have fallen silent, an unsettling quiet that whispers of an impending catastrophe. My dwindling stock of wood mirrors my own fading hope. God help us all. William knew that in this village, a lack of wood meant a dance with death, yet recent restrictions had made it nearly impossible to gather sufficient reserves. The frail neighbor, Elsa Higgins. A mere 300 yards from, several hundred feet away, lived Elsa Higgins, a woman in her 70s, living in solitude since her husband was lost to the sea decades ago. William always kept an eye out for her. That morning, the silence struck him, no smoke from her chimney. Stepping inside, the air was colder than the frost outside. Elsa was huddled, barely clinging to life. The onslaught of the blizzard. As William moved to fetch his own meager supply, the blizzard struck. The wind ripped through the valley, reducing visibility to zero. He returned to his hearth, realizing the few pieces of wood he had saved wouldn't last 2 hours, let alone the 12 to 15 the storm would rage. He opened his diary, his fingers numb with cold. The fury of nature has begun. Elsa fades. There is not enough fuel to be found, and to venture into the woods is certain death. What choice do I want? My own warmth or the flickering life next door? The moral dilemma. William Beamish was no hero. He was just an ordinary, painful man, his body weary with age. To give away his wood meant his current peril. Then his gaze fell upon his front door. Solid oak, built with his own hands 2 decades ago. It was his shield against the world. A sudden gust burst through the window, bringing a blast noise. William knew the time had come. He raised the axe, facing the ultimate dilemma.
The wind didn't just blow through County Cork that night. It roared with a hungry, predatory howl. Inside his workshop, William Beamish stood paralyzed for a second, his calloused fingers gripping the handle of his felling axe. He looked at his front door, a massive slab of seasoned oak he'd carved with his own hands 20 years ago. It was more than wood. It was the only thing standing between him and a frozen grave. But 300 yards away, Elsa Higgins' chimney was cold, and in weather like this, a cold chimney was a death sentence. William took a breath that felt like swallowing glass and swung. The sound echoed like a rifle shot. The axe buried itself deep into the heart of the oak. With every swing, William felt a piece of his own life splintering away. This was the door he had closed to keep his children safe. This was the door he had leaned against and wept the day his wife, Martha, died. Now he was hacking it into pieces. He didn't stop until the door was nothing but a pile of heavy planks. He tied them together with a hemp rope, hoisted the massive weight onto his aching shoulders, and stepped out into the white void. The blizzard hit him like a physical wall. Visibility was zero. The snow was a blinding, swirling sheet of white fire. He stumbled, his lungs screaming for air, his vision blurring. He was walking through a graveyard of ice, guided only by the memory of the path he had walked for 40 years. When he finally kicked his way into Elsa's cabin, he found her slumped in her chair, her skin the color of ash. He didn't say a word. He knelt at the hearth and began to build a fire using the only thing he had left, the remains of his own home. As the first flames licked the oak, the room filled with a deep golden glow. The heat began to push back the shadows of death. William sat there for a moment, watching the old woman's chest begin to rise and fall with a steadier rhythm. He had saved her. But as he looked out into the darkness towards his own house, he realized the cost. His home was now a hollow shell, open to the killing wind. He had traded his shield for her life.
The fire in Elsa's hearth roared with a new ferocity, fed by the high-grade oak of a master carpenter's door. But for William, the victory felt heavy. He stood up, his joints popping like dry twigs, and looked at the woman he had just snatched from the brink. She was breathing, shallow but steady. He had done his part here. Now he had to face the monster he'd let into his own house. When he stepped back outside, the world had vanished. The blizzard was a whiteout, a chaotic wall of frozen needles that stripped the skin off his face. He fought his way back across the yard, trailing his hand along the fence line just to keep from wandering into the woods to die. When he reached his porch, he stopped dead. His house was screaming. Without the front door, the wind was rushing into the hallway, creating a high-pitched, ghostly whistle that vibrated through the floorboards. Snow wasn't just drifting inside, it was invading. It covered the rug Martha had braided. It piled up against the legs of the dinner table. His sanctuary had become an icebox. William didn't have the strength left to build a barricade. He dragged his heavy oak workbench across the opening, but it was a desperate losing move. The cold was a physical weight now, pressing down on his lungs, slowing his heart. He retreated to the back bedroom and pulled his leather-bound diary from his coat. His fingers were blue, nearly useless, but he forced the pen to move. December 14th, 4 a.m. The house is dying. I can hear the timber groaning under the weight of the drifts. It's funny. I spent my life building things to keep the world out, and here I am, inviting the winter in for tea. My fire is gone, but Elsa's light is still flickering through the storm. If this is the end of the book, let it be known. I didn't lose my way. I chose it. He wrapped himself in every quilt he owned, shivering so hard his teeth rattled. But then the shivering stopped. That was the danger zone. In the silence of the bedroom, he started to feel a strange, deceptive warmth. He saw Martha sitting at the foot of the bed, her face young again, reaching out a hand. The wind continued to howl through the hollow mouth of his home, but William Beamish didn't hear it anymore. He was drifting into a sleep that had no morning. The sun didn't rise the next morning. It just bled a pale, sickly gray light over a world buried in white. The wind, which had spent 12 hours trying to level the village of County Cork, had finally run out of breath. It left behind a silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing your lungs. Thomas O'Shea, a local blacksmith, was the first to dig his way out. He looked toward Elsa Higgins' cottage, expecting to find a cold chimney and a shroud of death. Instead, he saw a thin, defiant ribbon of blue smoke rising into the air. He let out a shaky breath of relief. But then he turned his gaze toward William Beamish's house. He dropped his shovel. From a distance, William's cottage looked like it had been hit by a wrecking ball. The front of the house was a gaping black wound. There was no door, no barrier. The blizzard had been invited straight into the heart of the home. Thomas called out for help, and two other men joined him as they waded through the waist-deep drifts. They stepped over the threshold, crossing the empty space where the massive oak door should have been, and entered a house that had been turned into an icebox. Snow covered the dining table. Frost hung from the ceiling beams. It was a tomb made of wood and wind. They found William in the back bedroom. He was propped up against the headboard of his bed, wrapped in every quilt he owned. The frost had settled in his beard and turned his skin to marble. He looked like a statue carved from salt. His eyes were closed, and his expression was one of absolute, terrifying peace. On the floor, right where his hand had fallen, lay the leather-bound diary. Just then, a cry broke the silence from outside. Elsa Higgins had come out onto her porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl. She was shivering, but she was alive. She looked at the men standing in William's doorless house, and then she looked at the glowing embers in her own hearth. embers of seasoned oak that had kept her heart beating through the longest night of her life. She didn't need a witness to tell her what had happened. She collapsed into the snow, sobbing for the man who had torn down his own life to keep hers from flickering out.
The spring of 1879 eventually came to County Cork, melting the snow and revealing the scars the winter had left behind. But the story of William Beamish didn't wash away with the slush. It settled into the soil, becoming a part of the local legend, a quiet, powerful piece of hidden history that you won't find in any textbook. For a long time, the Beamish cottage stood empty, but the men of the village, led by Thomas O'Shea, didn't leave it a ruin. They gathered the finest oak they could find and built a new door for that house. They worked in total silence, a communal tribute to the man who had taught them the true price of brotherhood. They didn't build it for a new tenant. They built it because a house that gave its soul to save a neighbor deserved to be whole again. William's leather-bound diary was recovered from that frozen room. It wasn't full of grand political theories or records of wealth. It was a simple ledger of a life well lived. The final entry, written in a shaky, dying hand, became a mantra for the village. The wood is gone, but the warmth remains. That book was passed down through the O'Shea family for over a century. It sat on dusty mantles in Ireland and eventually traveled in a suitcase across the Atlantic to America, a silent passenger in the hands of immigrants who carried William's spirit of resilience with them. If you walk the hills of County Cork today, you won't find a bronze statue of William Beamish. He wasn't a general or a king. But you might find an old-timer sitting by a pub fire who will tell you that on the coldest nights, when the wind screams like a banshee, you can still hear the rhythmic thwack of a carpenter's axe. They say it's a reminder that no matter how dark the storm gets, the human spirit has a way of finding its own light. William Beamish proved that the greatest stories aren't always about the people who conquered nations. Sometimes the most important history is made by a man with calloused hands and a heavy heart who looked at his own survival and decided it wasn't nearly as important as the life of the person next door. He was a carpenter who tore down his own walls to build a bridge for someone else. And in the end, that is the only kind of history that truly matters.